Asking for help, it feels like it should be simple, right? But for a lot of us, it's actually one of the hardest things to do. And it's so important. It can totally change the game in our careers, in our personal lives. The thing is, it's not just what you say, but how you say it. So today, we're going to dive into the art of asking for help the right way. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to jump into a super relatable story from the office to see how this all plays out in the real world. Then, we'll crack the code on some of those key office phrases. After that, I'll give you 3 super simple rules for asking for anything. We'll also talk about how to switch things up depending on the situation. And then, at the end, we'll wrap it all up into a toolkit you can start using like tomorrow. Okay, let's kick things off with a scene that I'm sure is going to sound familiar to a lot of you. Picture this. Deadlines are closing in. Your to-do list is a mile long and you've just hit that wall, that breaking point. You know you've got to say something. And that's exactly where our story starts. So this is what Tony, our employee who's totally swamped, says to his boss. And this is a really key moment. Notice what he's doing here. He's not just saying, hey, I have too much work. No, he's pointing to a bigger issue. He's reframing it from I'm drowning to we have a staffing problem. That's a huge shift. And what's the boss's reaction? Well, it's probably one you've heard before, now's not a great time. He says the company doesn't have the resources, and yeah, we're definitely going to talk about what that word really means in a bit, to bring on someone new full-time. So boom, there's Tony's first roadblock. Okay, but this is where Tony gets really smart. He doesn't just give up, he pivots. Instead of pushing for a full-time person, he comes up with a different idea. What about an intern? And just listen to how he phrases it. She would take some of the weight off my shoulders. He's not just talking about tasks, he's painting a picture of relief. It makes the benefit feel so much more real. And guess what? It totally works. This is a perfect example of a key principle here. You've got to find a solution that helps everyone involved. For the boss, an intern is a great low-cost fix. For Tony, it's the help he needs. It's a classic win-win situation. So the boss is on board, he makes it happen. But then on the first day, there's this little twist. Tony had just assumed the intern would be a she. And in walks Adam. It's just a little thing, right? But it's such a great reminder of how our own little assumptions can sneak into how we talk to people. All right, so that story was great, but it's not just about Tony getting some help. It's really about the words he used. His whole conversation was packed with these common office phrases that mean more than they seem. So let's crack the code and figure out what's really being said. First on the list is that word resources. When the boss said they didn't have the resources, he didn't mean they were out of paper clips or office chairs. Nope. In the business world, that is almost always code for one thing: money. It's just a more professional way to say, hey, the budget's a little tight right now. Next up, understaffed. This was the problem Tony put his finger on right at the start. And it's pretty simple. It just means you don't have enough people to do all the work that needs to get done. Everybody feels like they're being stretched way too thin. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's a super common issue. And what about that phrase, take some of the weight off my shoulders? I love this one. It's such a great way to put it, isn't it? Because it creates this really powerful mental image. It takes something abstract, like stress or heavy workload, and turns it into a physical thing you can almost feel. It just makes the whole problem feel more real, and the need for help more urgent. And last one here. Give me a hand. Tony could have just said, help me, but give me a hand feels different. It's more casual, more collaborative. It sounds less like you're demanding something and more like you're inviting someone to pitch in. It just makes the whole thing feel a lot more friendly and approachable. Okay, so we've looked at a real-life example, and we've broken down the lingo. Now let's zoom out a bit and pull out some universal rules from all this. Because what we're about to cover is a super simple framework that works pretty much anywhere, whether you're talking to your boss or just asking a stranger for directions. Really, it all comes down to 3 basic steps. That's it. 1, start politely. 2, be super clear and specific about what you need. And 3, always, always show you're grateful. Let's dig into each one and see why they're so powerful. So step 1 is all about setting the right tone from the get-go. Those little phrases like, excuse me, or sorry to bother you, they're not just fluff. They're actually really important. They send a signal that you respect the other person's time. And that one small thing makes them way more likely to actually listen to what you have to say. Okay, step 2. Clarity is king. Your whole goal here is to make it as easy as possible for the other person to help you.
Think about it. If you just say, I'm lost, that's a problem, sure, but now they have to figure out how to solve it. But if you say, could you tell me where the bank is? Bam, you've given them a specific question they can answer right away. You're basically doing the heavy lifting for them, which makes saying yes a whole lot easier.
And last but not least, step 3, gratitude. This one might seem obvious, but it's so easy to forget. A simple thank you or I really appreciate that goes a long way. It makes the other person feel like their effort mattered. It's not just about ending this one conversation on a good note, it makes them more likely to want to help you again down the road. It's a huge deal. All right, so we've got our 3 big rules. Start polite, be clear, show gratitude. Simple enough, right? But, and this is a big but, you can't use them the same way in every situation. I mean, you're not going to talk to your boss the same way you talk to your best friend. The real skill, the art of it, is knowing how to tweak your approach depending on who you're talking to and what's going on. I mean, just look at the difference here. When things are formal, like with a stranger or at work, you're going to use more polite, almost careful language. But with friends or family, you can be way more direct, way more casual. The big trick is just to read the room, pay attention to the social cues and make sure your tone fits the vibe. But okay, there is one major exception to all this, and that's an emergency. When something is really urgent, all that stuff about formal politeness, it just goes right out the window. The most important thing is speed and clarity, not social graces. You need to be direct, you need to be loud, and you need to be clear. Trust me, your tone of voice will get the point across. And don't forget, it's not just about the words you say. Your body language is a huge piece of the puzzle. How you carry yourself can make all the difference. Speaking clearly, making a bit of eye contact, having a friendly look on your face, all of that makes you seem way more approachable. And even simple things like pointing at something you're talking about can make your request instantly easier to understand.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground, right? We went from one specific conversation in an office all the way to these big, universal rules of communication. So now, let's bring it all home and pack everything we've learned into a simple toolkit that you can use anytime, anywhere.
So, what are the big takeaways here? Let's do a quick recap. First, we saw how starting with a story can give amazing context. We learned some key phrases to help you sound more natural. We've got our 3 golden rules down: be polite, be clear, and be grateful. We talked about how crucial it is to adapt your style to the situation. And finally, we remembered that how you look when you're asking is just as important as what you say. And that pretty much wraps it up. But I want to leave you with one final thought, a question to kind of chew on. As you go into your week, whether it's at work or at home, just think, where's one spot, just one opportunity, where you could try asking for help a little bit better? Because sometimes those tiny changes can make a massive difference. Thanks so much for hanging out for this explainer.